Well, what's up again there, guys? Brian here, the 3 topics giving here to share if you know one of my awesome worst to best tier list style ranking videos to share with you guys today. Now, with the upcoming Dead Space Remake getting very close to release, I thought it would be just a great idea for me to actually go back and revisit the original Dead Space and do a ranking of all of the weapons in terms of how I enjoyed them, in terms of which ones I would recommend you use from worst to best. Now, if you do happen to enjoy this little ranking video of mine by the end, please do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to track on all my future videos. And remember, if you have any future ideas for either ranking videos or reaction videos or just reviews in general, let me know in the comments down below, and I'll try to get them up as soon as I can. Now, for this particular list, when you see it in the next few moments, this is probably the best tier list ranking video list that I could find online. But one thing it does do is it does add the few new weapons from Dead Space 2, which heck, I'm not complaining about, since Dead Space 2 did add a few new weapons that I didn't, I don't think they're all that much. Well, there's one really good one. But heck, I'm not really going to complain, because Dead Space 2, I think, is a better game than the original one. And it does have a number of, one key weapon that I think is just absolutely great. So let's jump into this ranking. Here's how I would do it. I would go from weapons that I absolutely loved, weapons that I liked, weapons that I thought were just okay, weapons that I just wasn't impressed with. Of course, there are a number of weapons that I just flat out didn't use at all because I just thought they were useless. So we're going to start from the bottom up and go with the one weapon that I really just did not use, and I absolutely do not recommend anyone use if you happen to pick this up in the game, maybe by accident, or maybe you could just save your money and just not get it at all. So, first gun that I would not recommend at all is, I would not recommend that you, where the hell is it? There it is the Force gun. The Force gun is, if I remember correctly, it is the only non-lethal weapon. Why you would want a non-lethal weapon when fighting necromorphs, I have no idea, but pretty much it just fires a compressed force of air. So this is a weapon that you would use to kind of knock enemies back. So I'm guessing the concept of this is you would knock your enemies back in order to give you time to reload one of your other guns, but then why don't you just use one of your other guns and, let's see, are there any other weapons I would put in the unused? I would just wouldn't recommend them. I think that's about it. I think that's the only gun I would just recommend. There's just no purpose for this to even be here. Now, I was going to the weapons that I just wasn't impressed with. I'm actually going to go with the rivet gun from Dead Space 2. The rivet gun to me was just a glorified nail gun. Now, trust me, pinning enemies to the walls, to the ground, that's always a good tactic, but there are other weapons that can do that better, that can do more damage, and on top of that, with your kinesis, you can just rip off the limbs of dead necromorphs and use those to pin enemies. I don't really think I need just a glorified nail gun. It's cool in design, but it's just a weapon that I really just wasn't impressed with. The next weapon that I also just wasn't really impressed with was the contact beam. Now, the contact beam in certain situations could be good against larger enemies. It's basically like a giant charge rifle. The problem is that it's not a good, in my opinion, it's just not a good weapon when dealing with enemies at close range. And for a lot of these areas in Dead Space 1 especially, you're dealing with either hallways or areas where typically enemies are faster, and so the time it takes to charge this weapon is just not very good. And if you don't use enough nodes to upgrade this weapon, then it's just not a good weapon to use in either single enemies or even large group of enemies. You kind of need a key weapon that can handle either stronger enemies, which this could do, but I just think it takes too long to charge up. You could speed up its charge speed, but I just think that the amount of money that you need to get the research in order to improve this weapon, it's just not worth it. It can be put towards more efficient weapons, which is why I was never really impressed with the contact beam. Another weapon that I also just wasn't impressed with was the flamethrower. It's a flamethrower. I'm like, okay, you can set your enemies on fire, but you kill these enemies by blowing their limbs off. I mean, I guess you could cause enough damage by burning them, but it's just not a weapon that I would recommend. I mean, and again, just like the contact beam, it's not that it doesn't have its uses. It's just that there's other weapons that are just more efficient and more it's better for multiple situations. I just couldn't think of a key situation where the flamethrower would really be a good weapon to use, because you're going to be dealing with a lot of enemies at medium to close range. Very few times are you going to have a long distance to fight enemies. That does not happen very often in Dead Space. It happens like a few times, but not enough that I would recommend that this is a weapon that you carry on you. And in Dead Space 1, you can only carry up to 4 different weapons. I typically only carry like 3 on me at any one time, but it's just not that great of a weapon. Another gun that I also just don't think is all that great is the Seeker rifle. Now, this is in the same class as something like the Rivet gun, but it fires it fires a single shot, which can do a lot of damage. This was just something I never actually really used all that much also. And this kind of fit into the same department as like the Javelin gun. The Javelin gun, I think, is probably the best of the unimpressive weapons. I think its ammo capacity is definitely better. I just kind of put the Javelin gun, the Rivet gun, and the Seeker kind of in the same class, because they all, from one point or another, kind of do the same thing. I mean, their alternate firing modes are a little bit different, but for the most part, those three kind of just do kind of the same thing. So I think those are just the weapons I just really wasn't all that impressed with. Now, I was going to the weapons that I thought were okay. I'm going to go with the Ripper. The Ripper is a glorified chainsaw, and in a sense, it will fire a blade that is connected to a kinetic force that will allow you to pretty much tear enemies up to pieces when they get really close. Now, this is a weapon that you could use to enemies very, very close. This would work very, very good for the brutes. If you do not have ammo for any of your other weapons and you happen to get behind the brutes and you freeze them, or if you kinesis, this would be a very good weapon to cut off their legs. Their legs are very, very vulnerable from the back, and so the Ripper, in those cases, can be a very, very good weapon. And its alternate firing mode is also pretty good, because what it does is, instead of actually holding the blade out for like 10 seconds, you can actually fire the blade. So this thing can actually shoot razor, like cutting blades at enemies, which is really, really good, because being able to like aim for the legs in order to knock the necromorphs down, which would then leave them open for a follow-up attack, is always really good. You really want to pick weapons that will give you the advantage of giving you more time in order to hit them again. So targeting the legs is a really good tactic, and the Ripper is really, really good at that. The problem is that there's just other weapons that can actually do that from farther distances. The Ripper is really only good at kind of close range, so this is a weapon that you might get early on, but as you go farther in the game, you really don't want to get close to much tougher enemies, because there's enemies that can regenerate, and they're just as dangerous even if you cut off their arms or legs and keep things going. So Ripper's good, I like it, but there are better weapons than that. Let's see, what else? I think that's about it in terms of just okay. Weapons that I like is the detonator. The detonator, it was in Dead Space 2, and it's basically a glorified mine gun. This is very, very good at control areas, especially if you're in bigger areas where you know enemies are going to be coming from different spots. So what you would do, or how I would handle the detonator, is I would place it in front of vents, and I would set them up for I believe you can time them so that when an enemy comes out, they immediately detonate. Because when you're in areas where there's definitely multiple different entry points, it's very, very good to be able to maintain control so that you're not getting swarmed from too many different directions. You kind of want to control how many enemies get into the room at any one time. And I think the detonator is really, really good. And besides, this is also a weapon that you can use. Like if you have an enemy that's charging or coming at you, you put a mine in front of you, you back up, you wait for it to charge, and then you detonate it right as it's on top of it and cause a lot of damage. Very, very good weapon in that case. Now, these last few weapons, let's see what else. I also do like the line gun. A lot of people don't. Sorry, don't like. Sorry, I'm still got a cough. I've seen a lot of people don't really like the line gun all that much. I like the line gun. Very, very good for targeting the limbs, but it's its alternate firing mode that I really, really like. It's active. It works almost similarly to the detonator, but what you can do is it fires, the best way I can describe the line gun's alternate firing mode is not only can the base form of the line gun do a lot of damage of just hitting an enemy, but what it does is it fires like this sort of energy force that you can connect with other ones, if you fire like multiples, it can create a force field that holds enemies, and then after like 5 seconds, it detonates, and like anything in the area gets blasted and causes a lot of damage. So the line gun can actually be very, very useful. In fact, the line gun actually helped me significantly in one of the most tougher areas in Dead Space 2. But as we go to the top of the list, we have to go into the weapons that I absolutely love. Without question, the best crowd control weapon of all time is the pulse rifle, which strangely enough is the only weapon in this game that is not an official mining tool. This is the only one that is classified as a pure general gun weapon in the Dead Space universe. So I do find it interesting that that one weapon is without question the best crowd weapon. Not only does it have the fastest firing speed, the highest ammo capacity, but if you find yourself surrounded, it has this really awesome alternate firing mode where Isaac will point it up and it'll shoot in 360 degrees. It'll burn through your ammo really, really quickly, but this is a good weapon if you find yourself surrounded. It is by far the best crowd control weapon in the game. Now this is also followed by what is the most iconic weapon in the franchise, which is the plasma cutter. The plasma cutter is just a perfect utility weapon. It's a simple weapon. It has a good firing rate, not as fast as the pulse rifle, not as good. It's just like the first weapon you get, but it's like the perfect for almost any situation. And the cool thing is that the alternate firing just allows you to switch the firing direction. So you can choose from either shooting vertically or horizontally. So you can actually go to horizontal to go for the legs, or vertical to go for the arms. And you can switch them really, really quickly. But this is just the go-to weapon. This is the weapon that I typically end up using the most in any playthrough of this game. But there's only one weapon that is the GOAT of all weapons in the history of Dead Space, and that is the hand cannon, or the foam finger from Dead Space 2. This thing is a monster, because here's what this thing does. This little finger, this hand cannon, this foam finger is so powerful that all you gotta do is point towards an enemy, and then Isaac just says bang, and the enemy instantly explodes. Their limbs get blown off, it just shreds anything. And it's infinite ammo too. So this thing works incredibly well on even boss fights. So you just point at the boss and you just say bang, and the boss just drops. Now, in order to beat this game, you have to beat it on the hardest difficulty in Dead Space, but Dead Space 2, but it's worth it. It's just hilarious. Just seeing enemies just come in and you just saying bang, 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 and just enemies just dropping. It's quite hilarious, but it is powerful as hell, and I love this gun the most out of any weapon in Dead Space. Which, makes me wonder if we'll ever get like a remake to Dead Space 2, which I would just be over the moon for if they announced that. So that is my worst to best tier list ranking of all the Dead Space weapons. Now, if you've played Dead Space 1 or at least Dead Space 2, how would you rank these weapons? Share your ranking with me and everyone else in the comments down below. And like always, thank you guys for watching. You're awesome, and I'll see you all next time.